If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell icon to get the latest updates.
Last time we were talking, just a quick recap about navigation, just kind of familiarizing and kind of introducing Workday and what Workday is all about, talking about the different sort of tenants, production, sandbox, and implementation tenants. And in both sandbox and implementation tenants, there's two other tenants or type of tenants, which are preview tenants. So it was all about navigation. It was about just introducing you to the different tenants. And hopefully if there was labs, you got to look at the different sort of navigation. And hopefully what I emphasized in the last class is that there's several ways to get to the same information. And, you know, because it's an object action-based kind of model, you could take different actions on these different objects. But hopefully what I also showed is that it's a pretty intuitive sort of navigation once you kind of get familiar with it, and that search is basically your friend. Anything that you're looking for, as long as you have the appropriate security, you'll be able to navigate to that page. So today we'll be talking about organizations. And here's the disclaimers. I know I read them last time. Just going to give a minute for everyone to just read them again, just in case if you're new. Not sure if any of you are new to the course, but also just for the recording. All right, so on the agenda today, so an organization overview, talk about supervisory orgs, which is foundational to learning HCM. And then characteristics of the supervisory org, being able to create these supervisory orgs and kind of move them around, assign roles, create cost centers, create locations, and staffing models. So staffing models, I'm going to hold off for the next session, but I'll talk up until the locations piece. And let me give you the organization overview. And I am going to jump into another screen. So organization types, there's several different types in Workday, but the one that's key for us is supervisory. And again, like what I said, is that this is foundational to Workday HCM. So you have to, whenever you get a tenant, when you're at the customer site, most likely, if you're not from like an implementation partner, this will kind of be set up for you, but you'll have to still, you know, if there's any changes or anything like that, you'll have to play around with this. But again, if you understand supervisory orgs, everything else kind of will make sense. We will touch upon companies, cost centers, possibly even regions, but the other areas we don't have to worry about too much. And we need the whole kind of basis for supervisory org is kind of to just lay not only the foundation, but create these buckets that you can hire workers into these supervisory orgs so that they can become part of the org type. I will jump back into here. And then here's the organization overview. So I'm just going to read the slide and then add color to it. An organization is used to group resources, workers, and costs to support a particular business function. A supervisory org is the primary, and just like I said, foundational organization structure. Workers kind of get grouped and tracked within the supervisory org, and like the commonly used ones are going to be company, cost center, and region. So when you create a supervisory org, and I'll show that in a little bit, basically you're mapping all these other organization types to it: company, cost center, and region. And what that helps with is more around the reporting piece. And an organization can have, like, just like how I'm talking about, is you create your supervisory org and then the other information kind of maps to it. So some of these people will be part of this region. Some of these people will be part of this cost center. So a supervisory org can be created and other org types get mapped to it. And another important piece for organizations is that It helps with security access to different information, different reports. And we have reporting here as well. It helps you report information. So if you want to see um, kind of what the expenses are for a specific cost center or who's part of a specific cost center, you can use reporting to kind of see that information. Or let's say you want to see how many people are in a specific location. That's also another organization type. And that's what that helps with. Like, let's say if somebody from the executive management team wanted to see how many people are in my Texas location, or even go further down, how many are in Texas? And then if they wanted to further filter down, how many are actually in the Austin office versus the Dallas office versus the Houston office? And then the other thing that organizations kind of help with is around business process. So like, for instance, if we think about the hire BP, every organization within the company may have a different business process to hire folks. So let's look at this as an example. So let's take a step back. As I mentioned, supervisory orgs, kind of foundational. And in here is where jobs, position, and compensation are going to be tied to a supervisory org. And let's say I need to hire somebody. So I want to hire Logan McNeil. I can't just hire her. I have to hire her into a supervisory org. So let's say the supervisory org is human resources, where a position has already been created that I need to fill. So Logan McNeil is going to be hired into this position. And then, of course, there's going to be compensation associated with it. But this human resources supervisory org will have a specific BP associated with it, which is the hire employee. And in it, there might be 4 different steps for this hire employee, like go ahead, make an offer, review the compensation, onboard this employee, let's just say. But let's say this supervisory org is really now the IT department. Over here, if Logan McNeil was to be hired into that position as, like, let's say desktop support or something, they may have a different hire employee business process. So they may have configured 5 different steps where they need, some agreement to be signed before the student, the customer is onboarded, or this employee is onboarded. So the business processes get tied to the supervisory org, and every supervisory org can either have one business process, like the same one, maybe it's all the same throughout the company, which I would think is kind of strange, or they're very specific to the supervisory org and they can be configured in that way. Any questions so far? I'll continue moving on. So again, just going back to the different organization types, the one that is most important to HR is the supervisory matrix and retiree. We'll just basically focus on the supervisory one. And then these are the cross-functional org types. So independent of what module or what you're sort of tracking, you'll always need a location hierarchy. The custom organizations we're not going to get into, but that's something also that can be used cross-functionally. Then there's these other organization types: committee, academic unit, union, talent pool, location as well. So you'll see, like, academic unit, this is for higher ed. So again, depending on the modules that you have and what you're going to be implementing. But since we're only focused on HCM, we don't really care right now about these other ones. But if you're implementing, let's say, payroll, you'd be interested in this pay group. If it's financials, you'd probably be interested in these other ones. But all this slide is really emphasizing is, organization. The supervisory ones are foundational for HCM, but there's many others out there. And then if you continue to stay in this Workday kind of space, you'll, if you go on a financials project, or maybe are going to be implementing payroll, you'll probably be touching these other ones as well. All right, let's move on. So talking about supervisory organizations. So all of these, as we mentioned kind of last time, are supervisory organizations. So this Global Modern Services is one supervisory organization. This executive management group is another organization. Information technology is another one. Let's say that kind of goes a step lower into this IT services group. That's another supervisory org. And to the last kind of on this list is the IT help desk department. So all of these kind of are bucketed into supervisory orgs. Then there's people, right, that make up that supervisory org. So there's a team of people that are part or members of the supervisory org. So at the top level, you have that Global Modern Services. Steve Morgan is a member of that supervisory org. But then you'll see there's several people. There's 4 people that kind of report into him. So he's a manager. He lives in the supervisory org above and won't be a member of kind of the supervisory org that is below him, the one that he manages. So the executive management group, all these folks report into him. And since he's a manager, he reports into the supervisory org above. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. I'll even jump into the tenant. And then you'll see manager Oliver Reynolds, he has 2 direct reports, and they're part of a different supervisory org, but it's the one that reports into him. So he will always sit, or managers always sit in the supervisory org above, and then the direct reports are underneath, and then you'll see that it continues kind of to keep following that flow. So the department is the supervisory org, or the team is the supervisory org. The manager always lives in the supervisory, is not part of the supervisory org that he manages. He always is one above. So hopefully I've emphasized that enough. Let me see what the next slide is. Okay. And so again, kind of, I showed the pictorial view of it, but I'll just read the definitions for supervisory organizations. So supervisory org, again, I think I've emphasized this enough, is the foundation to HCM. They help to group workers into kind of this management hierarchy. So again, how I was talking about that the managers kind of live above. This just helps with that kind of reporting structure again, and helps with this management hierarchy. And what I'll show in a little bit is a supervisory org can be a business unit, generally a department, a group, or a project. And then jobs, position, and compensation are associated with the supervisory org. And the thing that I was mentioning about the hire, just as an example, a hire BP, where it's tied to a supervisory org, the same thing. Any business process can be assigned to a supervisory org, and they can be different from supervisory org to supervisory org. And I kind of already showed this. And there's one thing that I didn't show is like you can even have these open positions, but as soon as someone's hired into it, so let's say in this example, there's no Logan McNeil, but Logan McNeil was applying for a certain position, and she's applying for this open position on the operations team. Once she's hired in, then this position will be filled and her name will be here, and she'll be part of this supervisory org or this department. And I will actually jump into a tenant. Let me just check if anybody has any questions. If not, I will go into the tenant. Can you guys still see the screen? Sorry, I'm going to have to keep on asking. I just want to make sure. And search for, maybe let's do it this way. Let's go ahead. As you know, I'm signed in as Logan McNeil. And again, something that I mentioned in the last class, and I'll emphasize again, Logan McNeil best person to log in as. She's kind of like a power user, super user, where she has the most security access. And especially in the beginning, it probably is best to sign in as somebody, or whenever you're on a project, go in with somebody that has the most security access. So that way you don't kind of run into like approving things, or who else do I need to log in as and stuff, because these business processes are pretty, the sequence of tasks, there's different people that are assigned to it. So you might run into hurdles of how do I get something all the way through? So Logan McNeil is the best person to log in as. One tangent that I'll make, if, I probably have mentioned, oh, if you're working with one of Workday's customers versus if you're working with a partner or implementing something. So I just want to talk a little bit more about that, just in case you guys aren't aware. There's many customers that now Workday has. So you don't need per se, like maybe a certification for it, but having this background, being able to navigate through, kind of understand the terminology and kind of play around in the tenant is more than useful to go ahead and work at any one of the customers that have HCM, Workday HCM. But then there's also these implementing partners, right? Like Deloitte, Accenture, there's probably many more in the ecosystem. And for those, you do need a certification, and those partners, you will have implementer access. So these implementers are kind of like Logan McNeil's, because they need to be able to configure a lot of this stuff. So when you go to a customer site, it'll look something like what we already have in this global modern services tenant, which is just a dummy tenant that's already pre-configured and everything. But when you're going as an implementer, many of the things won't be configured. You're going to have to sit down with the actual customer that wants this implemented and find out all their requirements, understand them, and then make sure that you're configuring things the right way before you kind of hand it over to the customer. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that before I just, because I know I've been mentioning it a couple of times. So over here, went to Logan McNeil's profile. You can go, last class I showed, you can get to the same sort of information several ways, but I want to show this. So Logan McNeil, she's the VP of Human Resources. The manager is Joy Banks, and you'll see over here we have listed the supervisory org. So there's several ways you can get, again, to the same information. So you could just click here, or do the related actions, which is kind of the way to take any action on any of these objects. And you'll see here there's org chart, or there's several other things. There's this organization. There was one more. Here, hierarchy and hierarchy structure. So I'll walk through each one and kind of show you that they kind of let you land in the same place, but there's just different ways of getting there. And then also this team area. So first, I'll just go ahead, click org chart. And what you'll see is when I clicked on the human resources, that's where I came from, human resources. So it just took me, even though I was coming from Logan McNeil, but because I'm clicking on the specific supervisory org and I wanted to look at the org chart, it took me to the whole, the person that is managing it. So she's living in the supervisory org above, and then the department here underneath. And as you can see, there's two kind of positions open that somebody can get hired into. And here's Logan McNeil. And if I want to go up and see, okay, what does human resources kind of report into? Oh, Joy Banks and human resources is kind of under the executive management group. And then there's these peers of other departments in here. So I'll get into this part a little bit more, but again, around the navigation, I can go ahead and do related actions here. It's not showing up. There we go. And then, view her team again, or take any of the other related actions over here. Or the other thing that I can do, and then what's interesting is now that they've also added kind of these outlines over here. So let's say I wanted to go back to Joy Banks' team, and then I could do that. And now it doesn't know where else I want to go. So if I click Logan McNeil, I could go down there, and this kind of gets updated, and this kind of shows you that management hierarchy, and you could continue going down that way. Or you could do, so this is kind of the org view, org chart over here. If I click this, this will show me a little bit more information, key information, like over here, what we have is the head count that needs to, head count to plan percent, how many females. A lot of companies these days are tracking this information, and average compa ratio. So if you wanted to see a little bit more information, you can go ahead and click that. And then over here is where you could see, let's say I don't really care while I'm looking at this org structure, how many contingent workers I have. I could just uncheck that. Or if I didn't want to see, like I see over here, how many open positions, I could just go ahead and unclick that. It should refresh, and it should show me all the positions that are filled with someone. And then the other thing that I wanted to show, let me just actually go into Logan McNeil again, is if I go to related actions over here, and sorry, wrong place, this related action, since I'm only talking about supervisory org, I would go here. There's also this hierarchy, so navigate hierarchy, just kind of showing that structure again, the management structure. And over here now it's less about management structure. It's more about how the supervisory hierarchy is kind of set up. So you can navigate that way. And then I'll go back to Logan McNeil. I'm going to go into her. And then the other thing, and view as a tree. So I haven't seen many people use this, but this is now being implemented, kind of this view, in a lot of different places. So just wanted to talk about it a little bit. So global modern services. So before we were kind of getting that pictorial view, this is just kind of showing kind of more of the skeleton view, and you could go ahead and further collapse, expand things, or collapse them if you just kind of want to see how things are being rolled up. And now I will go into global modern services. So any questions there, feel free to unmute yourself if you do have questions. Okay. And then what I wanted to show here. Okay, so when I went into the org structure, this is kind of, and let me do this so I don't have to keep on. See a new tab. And this is another nice thing, just in case if you hadn't realized it or already and it didn't make sense at the time, is you can open up multiple screens, which is really nice. And that's how you'll probably end up doing a lot of the work if you're in Workday, unless you need to do like a specific expense report or something like that. But especially when you're configuring things, it's very helpful to have multiple screens open and just kind of navigating between them. So over here, you'll see Global Modern Services kind of is the top of this hierarchy. So Steve Morgan is you have to assign a manager. So he's the one kind of the owner of this. And then there's two others, supervisory orgs that are underneath. So I kind of touched upon it, but going to go into a little bit more detail. Is once you create a supervisory org, you kind of have to lay out this hierarchy. Where does this department go under, sort of thing. So the way it's kind of mentioned in Workday is around subordinates. So this is that pictorial view. You have the executive management group and IT services that all report under Global Modern Services or are part of Global Modern Services. And the way you see that on this side is, excuse me, if you click on Global Modern Services, it tells you the type, which is supervisory, and the subordinates is the executive management group and the IT services. So it's just doing the same thing, and you're getting to see that here. And then this lets you know, this tab over here, who are the members. So since this is the top and there's no one else, the member is just Steve Morgan. And then here are the details, and we'll probably create a supervisory org so I could show you what you need to fill out. But here you have it. You have the type, supervisory. This one is actually a company, but the other ones that we'll create underneath, and I'll show in a little bit, will probably be departments. External URL, this is up to you if you want to even configure, but an important piece that you do not need to, but is kind of recommended, is a primary location to tie it to. Staffing, this is just the position, roles. These roles, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, they can either be assigned or inherited. So at this supervisory org, these were all assigned. So who the absence partner should be, you say, okay, this absence partner should be these two folks, who is the benefits partner. So all this stuff has been assigned to specific people that are going to take kind of that role or that job function. Security groups will probably be diving into much later on, so I'm just going to talk about that later. But here is where a supervisory org can be mapped to several different org types. And again, it's really around reporting. It's if you're reporting and you wanted to know how many people are part of this specific region, you can go ahead, excuse me, and just put in like headquarters corporate, and you'll get all the people that kind of tie into this, are part of this headquarters corporate. And then this other information we will not look at right now. So now if I want to go into a subordinate, so again, these are subordinates to this supervisory org, and executive management group, Global Modern Services is a superior. So that's the way you talk about the org kind of hierarchy, the supervisory org hierarchy. One is always a superior, but not like, since this is the topmost level, nothing's going to be the superior of this Global Modern Services. But this Global Modern Services is a superior to these two supervisory orgs. And if you wanted to say the same information in a different way, you would just say executive management group and IT services is a subordinate of Global Modern Services. So the way I will show that is if I click on one of these subordinates and expand this detail section, now you'll see that this is a superior organization, Global Modern Services, to the executive management group. And now executive management group it'll show you all the subordinates for it. So over here, if I actually click on it, it should mirror kind of 1, 2, there's like 5. So 5 subordinate kind of departments or groups. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here they are. These guys just report directly without having a supervisory org, but hopefully that's clear about superior and subordinates. And again, the org type over here is supervisory. And over here, you'll see this executive management group has more members, right? You have all these managers as well as individual contributors in this supervisory org. So most of these are managers except for these two, Olivia Price and Ava. And then here's the details for this supervisory org. So this one, the subtype is a group. Visibility is everyone. It talks about the superior, the subordinates, again, the primary location, which this is a kind of important to call out, and I'll call out in when we're talking about roles as well, is you may not have to at each supervisory org specifically state what location it is. If one location is not selected, it'll just always take it from the top level or the superior org. And it's really nice that Workday has this help text kind of letting you know. So that way, if you want to change it, you can change it, but it's inheriting this information. And the same thing with roles. Once you've assigned it at a superior, if you don't need to per se assign it unless you want it to be something different. So these also are inherited from the superior org. So Global Modern Services. As you saw, that one was assigned the roles. And over here, it's just inheriting the same roles, meaning these same people for this supervisory org is the absence partner, is the benefits partner, is the compensation partner. And this helps in those BPs. So let me take you to another tab. Sorry, I should have duplicated the tab. So BP, hire. And I will just, I don't see one for Global Modern Services, but I will just go with the default definition. And this is where those kind of roles are important, is if that supervisory org is following this business process, this hire business process, whoever is listed as the HR operations specialist, when somebody's being hired into this supervisory org, it's going to look for, and let me just filter HR operations specialist. Those approvals, those decision-making, any point of these actions or to-dos is all going to be routed to Logan McNeil. So that's where this kind of information is really important to make sure that if you need to change it and assign it, you could do that, and this will just change to assigned as I showed in Global Modern Services. Or if it's inherited and you just need to set it up at the superior and for it to kind of trickle down to the rest of them, it will, and it'll just say inherited. Another, and I'm sure we'll get into it when we're talking about reporting, but this is also another thing that I just showed, right? You can go ahead, filter, sort a lot of this information when you're looking at a long grid rather than searching through it. So I'll just remove that filter and it'll go back to normal. Okay, let me take a pause here. Okay, one other thing before I start kind of creating supervisory orgs, and I'm pretty sure it was kind of self-explanatory, but I just wanted to show. The other thing is that you don't necessarily, like, like I was mentioning, there's many ways to get to the same information. And when you go to Logan, you'll see that the manager is Joy Banks. If you go to Joy Banks, you'll see that the manager is Steve Morgan. So this is another kind of pictorial view to kind of see the management kind of hierarchy outside of the supervisory orgs. And something that I may have mentioned in the last class, but I want to make sure that I mention here is one supervisory org is equivalent to having to the number of managers you have. And you kind of get to see that over here, right? So here are the different departments. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 supervisory orgs, right? And you have 4 managers, right? This is a whole supervisory org and you have 1 manager. So a manager is kind of equivalent to how many supervisory orgs you should have. All right, so let me go ahead and close a couple of things. And let's start creating. This is something that you'll probably be doing in your lab assignment as well. But I think it'll be helpful for me to kind of walk you through how to go ahead and create it. It'll help. So the company that I'll be working with is this one. So I'm just creating like kind of like a fictitious company, kind of mirroring what's already in Global Modern Services. So I have ZaranTech, and then I have this executive management group, and I'll have these different departments here: human resources, information technology, finance and administration. And each one of these have further kind of departments or areas that I'll have to create supervisory orgs for. So I'll just kind of start it off, and then hopefully it'll get more solidified when you guys are going through the lab assignment. So the way you go ahead and do that is just create supervisory org. And something that'll help, I think, in the labs, especially if we need to kind of troubleshoot and stuff, what I'd recommend is just when you're creating that first supervisory org, go ahead, if it's not already in the lab, create this reorganization name. All this is kind of a way to kind of bucket your org together. So, you know, I don't want mine to be part of Global Modern Services right now. I'm creating kind of my own thing, and I just want to be able to see all the supervisory orgs that I'm creating under a specific name. So I will just show you. So training, and I'll just have this. And I would recommend kind of keeping a similar nomenclature just for the labs. So that way, you know, and maybe instead of my name being at the end, I will put it in the front. And I would recommend all of you guys to do the same thing, is do something similar, put your name, and then go ahead and maybe underscore training. And I will do a day before. It's always kind of helpful. A lot of times some customers choose like 1/1/1900. It's kind of standard practice, it seems like, for folks to do that when they're implementing Workday, especially because we just want this information to just always be available. So I'll click OK. And yeah, I want the supervisory org to kind of just be bucketed under this training kind of organization, categorization, I guess, is a good way to call it. And so you'll see every time that now I'm going to create a supervisory org, I'm going to kind of tie it to here so I can find it. And what I want to do is this is going to be my superior, the top and the topmost part of like the whole supervisory organization kind of hierarchy. So I am going to just call this, what did I call my, I think it was just ZaranTech.
Can you guys see this PowerPoint? Can you guys see the tenant? If you can. So I'm just putting the tenant up. If you guys can say yes to that, that would be great. I think you guys did say yes. Okay. All right. And I'm not sure what happened the last time, but I'll try to do a better job of making sure when I'm doing this that I check in a little bit more often before going too much further. So, all right. So I am going to start again on this. Let's do that. And then I'll cover, I think Ramesh, you had a question, so I'll be able to cover your question as well. So this reorganization piece is just a way to kind of, like, let's say I'm creating a whole different company or a whole different kind of like things are going to be reorganized a different way. This is just to kind of map and bucket everything together. It's really just reporting purpose and just when you're kind of laying down the foundation. So I am going to go ahead and just start all over again, just so you guys could see me walk through it. So this is what I was saying is when you're going to do this piece, when you get access to the tenant, go ahead, make sure you put your name in there. I'm going to put now Sarah 1 and then testing 1 so I could find this. And then I'll put the date as a couple of days back. Sometimes customers, like what I was saying in kind of in training, in the customer sites and stuff, a lot of times they use 1/1/1900 because they don't want to get tripped up with the dates and the effective dates and the reorganization dates. So now it's Sarah 1, testing 1. So I will click OK. And then I'll start again. The name of this top level, kind of the highest most level of the org that I want is to be, let's say, ZaranTech. And what I was saying is we could go ahead and select this information right now. Let's say you have a code for your org. Go ahead, put the whatever code that you want in here. So right now I'll just put 789. I'll say include the organization ID in the name, include the code in the name. And most companies, they do want to see the manager and the leader. So I'm hoping this is the part that I got cut off on, right? This is the part that you guys didn't see. If you guys could say yes again, that would be great. Or do I need to skip over anything?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Thanks for coming off of mute for that. Awesome. So, and the subtypes over here. So these are the ones that are, when you're implementing at a customer site, you'll go ahead and configure what you want these subtypes to be. This was already pre-configured, but it could be, it could be different things at different companies. Right now, at the topmost level, I'll just say that this is the company and everything underneath it, the subordinates, are going to be departments. And this is a really important piece. You want the visibility to be for everyone. I'm not sure this Java update thing that came up. Hopefully that doesn't mess anything up. Okay, so this is a really important piece. Visibility should be everyone, because just in case if you end up leaving the company, you don't want this to have just been for yourself or a select group of people. You want everyone to be able to see it. So you should always default to everyone. Primary location, we'll come back to it. And then there's 2 staffing models, and these staffing models, position management or job management. Right now, we'll just go ahead, select position. In the next class, we'll go over staffing models a little bit more. And then primary location. Let's go ahead. I have another tab open. Let's create a location. So everything best practice should be kind of tied to a location. We'll talk about location hierarchy later, but just so you get to see what are the important things to put in for location, I'll show you in this tenant already, somebody's configured locations already, right? So I could just select one of these, but I think it's important to kind of show you, especially folks that are going to be implementing this or working on implementation projects, you probably need to touch a little bit of everything. So I'm going to put SF, Sarah1, and location usages, you always want to select business site. For everything, like there's different location usages for different modules, but for this specific one, for HCM, we'll use business site. And let me take this off and click OK. And then here, you'll see there's pieces of information that you could put in. The most important piece of information is usually the address, of course, phone number, external URL if that's a thing. But I will just go ahead and put 56. All right, and this will be the primary location for it. But the reason that I am specifically showing how to create this location is because time profile. Time profile is really important when you're creating locations, and what locations these setting up these locations is really helpful is, let's say, somebody in the executive management group wants to see how many folks you have in a specific location, and is, how many people are in Texas, and maybe they want to even further filter down how many people are in Austin versus Houston versus Dallas, right? Maybe it's to figure out how much of that, what location is growing a little bit more. So this just helps with the reporting stuff. Time profile is useful. So let's say in different locations you have different times, right? Like standard hours. What are the standard hours in over here in San Francisco? It's 40 hours, but let's say in New Zealand, because of laws or other things, it's really 6 hours. That's kind of full-time work. But that doesn't mean that you can't hire somebody in as part-time. But this is when you're creating a location, it's really important to select time profile. But as you see, there's other pieces of information, but of course, pretty intuitive. Anything with the red asterisks, you need to make sure it's a required field and you need to make sure that you fill it out. So I'll click OK there. And now I want to use this location when I was creating that supervisory org. So I will click SF. This was the one when you guys couldn't hear me or see me. So I just created kind of the same thing. Just wanted to show you how that location is created. So now this should have all the information that that I need to put in. So all the red asterisk pieces are in. I talked about visibility. It has to be for everyone. These other pieces of information you can put in, and I'm just going to, check these off for right now. And there's hover text to kind of help you explain what this is. But let me show what this is when I click OK. When I click OK now, this is that topmost level, and the way we can see it is related actions and that pictorial view of it. I'm just going to close this. Here it is. It's just my lonely supervisory org by itself right now. And it's the only one, so there's no real superior or subordinate, as you can see here, because that information usually lives here. But here are all the details of it. So everything that we just selected, this is everything there. Now, and I'm just going to do a check again. I'm guessing hopefully everyone can hear me and see me because I'm not seeing any noise in the chat window. Is create a subordinate. So again, This is the topmost level. Now what I want to do is create something very similar to this model here, right? The exec management, human resources, information, like kind of build out this structure. So that's what I'm trying to do. And we're just at the topmost level over here. That's ZaranTech. Oh, and one thing I want to point out before I move on is, you know how we added like show me the code in there and show me the ID. So here's the ID part, that 789 that I had put in. And here is, or I think this was the code and here's the ID, this part. So most customers won't have this configured, but I just wanted to show you what it does to the name. You could, of course, always change the name by editing name and code. You could do that here. I'm just going to leave it as is, but you'll be able to change the name to whatever you like. So there's no such thing as deleting, just in case if I hadn't mentioned it to you before, but oh, where, here's my supervisory org. And what I want to do now is, I had the org chart open and I'll just show it from here, is now I want that subordinate, right? Supervisory org of exec management. So what I would do is you go to this reorganization piece and you do create subordinate. So again, in your lab, it's going to kind of ask you to do the same things. I'm just kind of walking you through it right now. So here it is. I'm just going to change the date to the day before. And organization name, this one is just exec management, or I'll just leave it as executive management. I'm not going to add these things. As you saw, it really clutters it. And unless your customer has this kind of nomenclature that they want, or when you're implementing it, the customer wants to see it that way, the best one is just leaving the manager or the leader's name in there. And then the organization subtype, this is going to be the department. External URL you can leave. And then as you saw, I created a primary location at the top level. And what I want to show you is this no longer is required, right? When I was creating that top level, it was required, but at this bottom level, the subordinate, it's not going to be required. And I'll show you what it ends up doing. So when I click submit, now here I am kind of building out that hierarchy, right? This is that topmost level. This is at the subordinate. And when I click into, or I refresh this page, so initially we were at the topmost level, and what we'll get to see is now ZaranTech, topmost level, the subordinate is executive management. And what you see again is no members, because we haven't hired anybody into these specific things or even created positions at this point. But when I go to the details section, everything that I filled out, but see, I didn't fill out location, but it's going to be inheriting. So it's not required anymore because it's going to get inherited. I could always change this as well if I wanted to and select something else. So edit primary location. And let's say I wanted it to be something else. So I'm just going to pick today's date. And I could select another active location if I need it to be that. But if you don't fill it in, it's just going to take what's inherited, and everything else, like anything that's not a required field, will just go ahead and inherit it from the superior. So now the next thing I want to create is continue building out the teams, right? Underneath it, this one had 3 other teams. And let me do this so that way I can see if you guys have any questions.
I had a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Of course. Yep.
Okay. The first question I had was, when you were creating it, I observed that it's called reorganization. What does the term reorganization mean? Instead of I mean, I'm assuming that it's instead of saying reorganization, you should be saying create organization.
Mhm.
So the terminology, I was a little bit confused as to why does it say reorganization when you're doing something brand new?
Yeah, so you know, initially, like implementers are the only ones that are kind of building things brand new, right? Once you're like the customer, you hand it off to a customer, they're really kind of just reorganizing the supervisory org. They may sometimes be building new, but most of the time they're just kind of reorganizing things around, right? Like once the hierarchy is kind of built out and stuff. So I think that's really the reason that they have that nomenclature there. For all intensive purposes, you could think of it as kind of the same thing, organization versus reorg. No specific reason it should be called one or the other.
Okay. The other question I had was you on the down, there were two check boxes. One is called position management and one is called the job.
Yep.
So when I say, so for example, does this mean it's a fully position management controlled or does it say it's a partial position management control? What does that mean?
So yeah, we will definitely get into it. The whole next class is about staffing model. Right now, I just want to keep it to, let's just go ahead and pick position management, if that's okay.
And the subtypes on the subtype, so it's basically not differentiating because the subtype can be anything. What you're saying is because it has
Yes.
so many choices it has down. I see that.
Yeah, and the other thing, I don't know if I said it the first time around or if I didn't highlight it the second time is, when you're configuring the tenant for the first time, you get to lay out whatever you want here. It could be group, it could be sub departments, it could be whatever you want to call these things. So it's really up to your customer what they want these subtypes to be. So it could be like, we just have 5 here that are configured, but they could have 20 for whatever they want to track, however they want to track things.
The question I had was the visibility. When you say
Yes.
visibility, everyone, does it mean globally it's assigning it, everybody can see it, or you can still control it? And right now, let's say, for example, you say visibility everyone, but you can still further control it later on to say within that everyone, say, I want access to only these departments to see this, or how does that
Yeah.
work?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. But generally, you would want, in all the companies that I've worked for, and they want everyone to see the different departments, right? So they know who to reach out to. There isn't really like kind of like a hidden department. But you could definitely control it by security. You could definitely control it through this visibility. But you want to make sure, again, that the default behavior or the best practice is everyone.
So it does have, so in future, the access, so let's say, for example, access might be, you're looking at the department as accesses differently than then it comes to data access, right? For example, if I have 3 departments, so I should be able to see only my data that belongs to my department, not somebody else. Even though you said here everyone, it doesn't mean that I can access somebody else's data.
Yes, that's correct. The data, like you could get as granular as you want with security, where even specific fields are hidden. But this is just, overarching, again, like just the supervisory org being visible, not necessarily the pieces of data on like the profile, let's say on somebody's profile. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
that that can be controlled further down. That's what
Yes, it can.
Thank you.
No problem. And Archana, I hope I answered, like the reason that we don't have the manager's name showing, if you see, there's no members yet, right? So that's why like it doesn't know who to show because nobody's really a manager yet of these orgs. So that's why you see the kind of parentheses, the empty kind of blank area. That's what that is. So yeah, hi Ramesh. I might have trouble hearing you. It's kind of
Okay, I know I have to for that.
Uh-huh.
The visibility and reorg are is there any like it has any functionality later on, like while looking at the reports or running the processes or something like that?
Yeah, so that reorg just kind of helps bucket things in, like categorizing everything into a specific group. So that way, if you did want to report on it, you can. But more than that, it's not, it doesn't really play any other function.
Okay, it won't impact any processes, something like that.
No, nope,
No, okay, thank you.
no problem. So now we're building it out. So the next couple of things I want to show you before we kind of wrap up, so that way it could help you with the lab assignment, is around using that reorg, right? So I showed you how to create a subordinate. So I'm going to further just really quickly create a subordinate for this one, the executive management group. There's a couple of departments that report into it. So human resources. And this time I'm just going to select this. This is yet another department, leave everything else blank. Submit. Great. And then you'll see now it's being built out further. We have that human resources. So another one that I wanted to, another way that you could do it, and I just want to show the difference that happens here, is I could just go back up here and do create subordinate and get that finance team and the IT team, or I could just go ahead, click this, because this is another team that reports into that executive management, and just do divide. Click OK here and fill out the same pieces of information. But because I didn't do it as create subordinate, let me just do do the manager piece again, department. Over here now I have that asterisk, right, showing, because it's not really inheriting now from anyone, because it's not really a subordinate of anyone. So I'm going to have to put in that piece of information. So there's two ways, right, of doing it. Hopefully that's really what I'm trying to show you guys, is just like with navigation, there's several ways of getting to the same pieces of information. Sometimes there's several ways of doing the same thing. So I did from here, in order to get the teams here, I could do create subordinate, or once I have a subordinate already available and I just need to further create them, I could just do divide. And I'm just going to continue with the subordinate and just continue filling it out. Click OK. And there's the department, and submit. Great. So now you see this kind of really quick view of how I'm building this out. And what you'll see here is, let's go back, update this. So topmost level subordinate is this. When I click into this one and expand the details, you'll see now there are those three subordinates, and the executive management team has this superior organization. And if I click into one of these, you look at the details, it'll show you what it inherited from the superiors, right? It inherited all of this information that was on the superior one. Let me see. What else I missed?
So Sarah,
Yep.
Is there the number of limits to how much hierarchy it can go down? How many levels
No,
or
no.
no?
So
Okay.
some companies may have, I can imagine like how many Amazon or
Right.
Google's, right? Like it can just continue going down. And, one thing that you'll see from release to release, they keep on improving the performance around here. They're trying to show different ways you can see the same information. I remember at one point you could just see everything and like the page used to crash depending on how big your organization was. So this is an area again like that is really key to a lot of customers. So you'll see they'll continue adding bells and whistles like this. We wasn't there before. Um, the different options of tree view and all this other stuff. It's just, as you can imagine, with the bigger companies, this just becomes a really gnarly kind of page to kind of navigate through and stuff like that. So they're trying to do their best to deal with that,
Okay.
but no limit. I'm just making sure. One other thing. So let's see if this one has it. Okay. So, assign superior, let's say that there's another, now IT department is getting moved and it's not reporting anymore to executive management department for whatever reason. There's now like a bigger IT department that's kind of like a peer to this one. We can go ahead and just create a superior that this one should report into, and then we'll just have to make sure that we update that a specific supervisory org to map into the topmost level, the company. So just trying to show that there's like flexibility in moving things around. Then also sometimes for whatever reason, again, like you can't really delete things out of Workday. What you can do is inactivate them. So you can inactivate this org and just move the workers out. So you'd have to make sure that, this department is empty right now. It is. So you can inactivate it and then it's just not going to be available in this hierarchy. I think what I'll do is go to cost centers and create a cost center and just showcase what a cost center is really quick. Okay. So I showed about the locations. You could have, oh,
Sarah,
Ramesh,
quick
is that you?
question.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Uh, can we create these supervisory org or any subordinate things for future data?
Yes, and that's what that date is for. So let's say that there's a reorg that's going to be taking place, like, I don't know, the executive management knows about this reorg that's going to be taking place in a couple of weeks. So everybody's aware and they just kind of need to make sure that the groundwork is laid, and then you have like, that's what that effective date is. The date that keeps on popping up is just saying like, when that date comes up. So let's say we put something out in the future, a week or 2 weeks from now. Once that we hit that date, on that day, all of this stuff is going to be effective. So if there was a reorg, like let's say the IT department went ahead and got split into two, or now it's reporting into a different org structure, you can kind of lay that out already and just have it dated for the date that should be affected.
On that note, Sarah, what about retroactive changes to prior? Go back.
Yeah, so going back again, you would leverage that date field again and saying like, when anybody's doing any reporting, let's say that this change was supposed to take place 2 weeks ago, you go ahead, you build out that structure, make sure that you select that date from 2 weeks ago, and then anytime anybody's doing any reporting or anything like that, it'll make sure to respect those changes that you made retroactively.
And can you have multiple effective dates?
Yeah, yeah. And so it's again, when you're reporting on it, let's say you're reporting on something 2 weeks um, in the past, whatever was effective that date, that's how the way it's going to report it. And let's say 2 weeks from now, so in the future, you have like a different org structure and you're reporting on something on that specific date 2 weeks from now, something in October, right? It's going to show whatever the changes should be for those dates. And you'll get to see, I think, as we continue going through there, like not this specific session, but as you continue playing with Workday, you'll see how effective dating works. And that's really what is driving the way that the org structure should be, or what changes should be reflected in the tenant. All right. So I showed the location, and you could have location hierarchy. Actually, before I move on to what I was going to show around cost centers, I should show you how location. So I showed you how you create a location. You could also create a location hierarchy, but instead of creating it, let me go ahead and show you what it looks like in this tenant. So it's very similar to what we're doing with supervisory orgs, like kind of showing you how to kind of build this kind of skeleton outline of supervisory orgs. So the same thing with location hierarchy. So you have your location hierarchy, and then they're the subordinates over there. And then, so this one, let me go back, is split up kind of into regions or continents: EMEA, Japan, and Asia Pacific, Latin America, North America. Let me go ahead, click on North America. And what that is this has further two subordinates: Canada, United States. Click on United States. Then these are specific regions. Click on Northeast. And this is probably really gnarly. Here's all the different ones. And what this helps with, these locations, is again just reporting, like how many workers do I have in a specific, and you see that view hierarchy headcount. And if I wanted to do the org chart, just very similar to what we were seeing, you could kind of navigate this. And that's why it's kind of, that's why it's asking for the primary location, like, is so that way it can map to specific locations, that supervisory org maps to specific locations. All right, then about, okay, so then the next piece that I wanted to talk about was cost centers, and it's the same thing. Create cost centers is the task that you would use for it. And you could do the same. What this is really for is really, again, mapping. If somebody wants to do some sort of reporting around kind of the revenue and expenses that are going on for a specific person or supervisory org, this just helps map to that. So instead of going through the same exercise, but it's just very similar to what we were doing with supervisory orgs. You would do create cost center, create the cost centers, and do the hierarchy there as well. So this just, again, helps with kind of reporting purposes, nothing more than that. Let me go into the slides and make sure I haven't missed anything. We talked about the management of it. We created subordinates. Creating cost centers is very similar. Maybe I'll just show you how that looks in the tenant. Let's do this instead. And we'll just go here. So how I was saying that things are just mapped to something, it's this, right? You could have this cost center, and what the cost center has is here are the details. So again, same similar type of information where you're going to select the type, the subtype is cost center, code, visibility is everyone, and then that cost center, this is where I came from, is human resources. It's just mapped to it. So that's all it's doing. So you could create a number of different cost centers and then just map them to different supervisory orgs. That's all it is.
Can you have multiple cost centers tied to one supervisory org?
All right. Any questions? I know we're coming close on time.
Can you tie multiple cost centers to one supervisory org?
Yes, you can. But generally, the best practice is to just tie one. And something that Alok was showing again, once you have access to the tenant, there are, so like for module 1, I didn't realize that you guys didn't already have access, but you could definitely go back and do the labs for each one. For this one, let me just show you what it looks like. And can you guys still see my screen? Yes, I'm hoping, yes. Okay, I'll just take that as a yes. Is the same thing that we were doing here, creating supervisory orgs is going to kind of walk you through step by step. And then, I would say just play around, but just make sure that reorg, again, you put your name and then underscore training. So that way, like if you run into any issues, I know exactly kind of where to go, and you're only kind of really messing around with the supervisory orgs that you're creating. And it's just going to help you with navigation. So you're going to create supervisory orgs, do the superior subordinates, orgs, kind of build out this, I think, specific model here. And then about different other organization types, right? Like there's that company, there's the cost center part that I was just showing you, and then how I walked you through location. And I think that is the meat of your um, lab. And uh, I know that this probably seems hopefully really basic, but this is really key to kind of understanding things and will probably make more and more sense. Like when I look back to the training that I particularly did a long time back, right? More than 10 to 12 years ago, it was at that time, this just seemed really foreign to me. But with time and as you continue using the tenant, it becomes very, very easy. And hopefully the navigation is intuitive. That search window becomes your friend as well. So let me see, does anybody have any other questions before we kind of sign off?
Yes, sir. This is Ramesh.
Mm-hmm.
General question I'm asking, like, so whenever we do, suppose we are creating a new supervisory org or some departments or whatever it is, the data we'll be creating either in the implementation or somewhere else. And is it possible in Workday to do on-demand data migrations?
Yes, yes. So, you can imagine, right? Like already customers are probably paying implementation partners a lot of money for their time and stuff. And, wherever we can save money and wherever customers can save time, right? Uh, uh, Workday needs to help them with that. So the way that it works is that they use um, web services kind of to transport data from one tenant to another. And if it's just taking a copy, let's say of one implementation tenant and moving it to another implementation tenant, you can request that as well. And then I'm trying to remember the name. I think it's called Ox now. Before it was like through iLoads and stuff, and now it's through Ox or data migration packages. It's called something like that, where I can't recall the specific name, but it just helps you migrate the data from one tenant to another. It helps you migrate the configurations from one tenant to another. So it necessarily doesn't even need to be between implementation tenants. So at least it saves you the time of taking the same steps, doing the same configuration from one tenant to another. Hopefully that helped answer your question. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining today. Last time I didn't take attendance, and that's why it wasn't updated today. I'll make sure that I go ahead and update attendance. Again, please feel free, like what Alok said, check out the LMS if you have any questions related to the LMS. That's what the support folks are there for. If it's tenant related, please make sure to reach out to the folks that are going to be sending you an email. And then anything that was a little confusing or didn't make sense, please go ahead and use that discussion board. I'll try to answer the questions as quickly as I can, but if it makes more sense to revisit those topics in the next session, I'll make sure to do that. All right. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you for attending the session. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, feel free to ask your questions in the comment section below, and we will reply to them at the earliest.